Hello, everybody, and welcome to Cadence. My name's Steve Boyce. I'll be your host for tonight's program. So excited to have you all join us here for our February edition of Cadence. And we couldn't be more thrilled to have you invest part of your valuable time with us here on a Wednesday evening in the middle of winter, although things are warming up, looks like in some parts of the country. So we've got that to look forward to. Now, folks, we got a great program tonight here. Our focus tonight is on one audience, two experiences, right? Very intriguing title. And we're going to be discussing with our great panel of special guests, who I will introduce in just a moment, about how having a parallel in-person and virtual event experience can affect your audience's overall value creation and their experience from that kind of a process. And our amazing panel will be diving into why it makes sense to augment a physical event with an online component. Can parallel events offer a better experience than the traditional hybrid model? And we'll get into what is the difference between those and how to avoid audience envy in parallel events, right? You want to make sure each side is getting the value that they need. So we're going to bring on our guests in just a moment. But folks, before we do, just a couple of program notes. As always here on Cadence, we want you to be a co-creator of this experience, right? We're looking to share our perspectives with you, but we also want to hear from your perspectives as well. So across the bottom of your panel, you're all familiar with the little chat and interactivity bar, folks. There is a chat option, so please use that function liberally throughout the program. Share your perspectives with our special guest tonight. Ask questions through the chat. Let us know what's on your mind. We'll try to incorporate that as best we can throughout tonight's program. And after we get through segment one with our featured guests, we'll be coming out to the tables to join you for a little networking and collaboration. And so we'll be looking forward to hearing more from you and what's on your mind during segment two. Now, folks, I'm going to go ahead and bring on our first guest tonight. We've got three special guests, so a packed panel and not a lot of time here to get into all of the content tonight. So I want to bring on our first very special guest. Welcome to the program, Ilana Chaffetz. Ilana is joining us tonight. Ilana, how are you?
I'm great. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here to chat with everyone.
Well, it's great to have you, Ilana. And let me just introduce you to our audience tonight. Ilana is a passionate supporter of grassroots movements and advocacy work. She's dedicated to helping others. As customer success manager at Gather Voices, she works with clients to develop strong and sustainable video strategies to help them achieve their organization's goals. So, Ilana, it's great to have you on the program tonight. Where are you broadcasting from this evening?
I'm in the Virgin Islands. I work for a very lovely company called Gather Voices, and we've really, all as a team, embraced the virtual experience and being able to work from wherever we want to be. So this week, I'm out on an island.
Fantastic. And if I understood correctly from the program notes, you're normally in a northern climate.
Correct? Yes, I'm normally in Chicago, which is very cold right now, so it's nice to be somewhere a little warmer.
Good timing for your trip south.
Yes.
Now, Ilana, love to have you maybe augment our short intro of you for our audience. Tell us a little bit more about yourself, what you do at Gather Voices.
Yeah, well, your intro was so lovely, so thank you so much for that. I'm the customer success manager. I'm actually the first one that Gather Voices ever hired. So I've been with the company for a long time, and it's really my job to work with our clients and help them, like you said, with their video strategy. That can really run the gamut on subject and goals, but certainly events is one large area that I'm consistently helping clients with. Before COVID hit and things were all in person, and then through COVID, taking a look at how to move things virtual and keep them engaging. That's definitely been a big part of my job.
Fantastic, Ilana. And I bet you've got some stories to tell, what we've all gone through over the past couple of years.
Yes.
We're going to get into that in a little bit here when we bring our other panelists on. Ilana, it's great to have you join us tonight. Let's go ahead and welcome our second special guest, Joseph Gerstel. Joseph, why don't you join the program here tonight? Now, Ilana and I on stage. There he is. Joseph, how are you this evening?
Hey, good. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic. Now, as we've done here, I've got a short intro that's been provided. Joseph Gerstel.
This is the part that makes me very uncomfortable. Go ahead, Steve.
Well, we have to let our audience know who you folks are and your great credentials. You are an innovator, novelty seeker, and all-around fun person. Joseph is the founder and CEO of Get Some Class. Love your background as well. After leaving a very expansive legal career to grow his business, he's turned his company into a leading service for virtual events. Joseph, great to have on Cadence tonight. Where are you broadcasting here from this evening?
I'm also on an island today, actually. It's a bit less exotic, I will say that. It's Long Island as opposed to the Virgin Islands, which just, sounds very exotic. But I'm on an island too. We support, remote work. I just happen to be in my house on that island.
Fantastic. I love that. And I thought you were maybe going to go to a metaphorical place, that you're on an island all by yourself, but you're literally on another island. We'll see if Leslie can round out the trifecta here when we bring her on. Joseph, we learned a little bit about you in the intro, but tell the audience a little bit about Get Some Class and what you do with your organization.
Yeah, so we are a virtual social events company, which means we leave the technical and the audio visual and all those kind of stuff to you guys, and we handle the fun. So, whether that's running a cooking event, bringing a DJ for a Name That Tune game show, having an espionage game run by, a trained facilitator, or all sorts of other programming like that, we do that. We also curate packages like charcuterie packages or raw ingredient food packages or our packages or whatever the hell you want, honestly. And we ship them to everyone involved. Well, internationally depends on, we're not shipping steaks internationally, but we'll ship steaks around North America.
Maybe yeah, that's what we do. Impossible steaks could make it, right? Do they make impossible steaks yet? I know,
you know what? We'll try sending one to the Virgin Islands, and we'll let people know once we're done.
We're doing some real-time innovation here on Cadence. I love this. And the FDA is listening. We'll adhere to all food safety rules and so forth.
Oh, let's not talk about alcohol shipping if the FDA is listening, okay?
It's all done by the book. Joseph, great. We hope to learn more about some of the programs that you're implementing with your clients. And we want to go ahead and bring Leslie Bailey on to join us as well. So let's bring Leslie on.
Hello,
Leslie,
everybody.
Great to see you tonight. How are you this evening?
Great. I hope everybody is ready to learn about parallel events, as I think this is a new term that we're all learning together.
Indeed, Leslie, and I appreciate you serving on behalf of our audience to try to get us through the intros to the program we're going to get to really soon. But first, there is a burning question that our audience wants to know. Are you broadcasting from an island tonight?
No, I am broadcasting from the place that Alana got away from. I am in Chicago while it's currently flurrying, so she got away just in time.
Well, we almost had 3 out of 3, but 2 out of 3 isn't bad. Leslie, it's great to meet you. Of course, I owe a short intro for you as well. Leslie has extensive experience in the virtual, physical, and hybrid event industries and is currently Executive Director of Client Success at Cadence. She empowers clients with the right tools and knowledge to enhance engagement and experiences. Leslie, add a little bit more to the brief intro. Tell us a little bit about what you've done in your career, and then we'll jump into tonight's topic.
Yeah, so I'm one of the lucky people that's actually been in digital events since about 2009. So when I tell people what I do, they ask me how it was to pivot. I luckily didn't have to pivot. I already knew exactly what was going on. So I'm really happy to help people who are just now getting into it. Hopefully, since they've gone over the 2-year hump, they have a little bit more strategy going on. But I help clients and I help contractors we work with as well really develop that digital strategy and hybrid, because hybrid is now coming back, hopefully in full force, to really strategize what their attendees are looking for, what their expectations are, because it's so important to now set those correct expectations in order to get the quality attendee experience you're looking for. So I help them with that strategy and also give them a little bit of background on how things were and how they can be.
Fantastic. Well, folks, it's so great to have each of you join us here tonight, Alana, Joseph, and Leslie. And I know our audience and community here at Cadence is anxious to hear about your perspectives on our topic tonight. This is really fascinating to me. And Leslie, I'm going to start with you because you kind of had a nice segue here around 1 audiences and 2 experiences. And you mentioned that we're seeing some trends with hybrid coming back. So I want to first open up with this panel and make sure we level set with our audience. When we talk about parallel events or experiences or hybrid, these different modalities, I've heard that's a fancy word. Leslie, from your perspective, what do some of these terms mean?
Yeah, so parallel and hybrid to me are completely 2 different things. So hybrid to me is an additional thing that you're doing to get that other piece, that virtual audience in with your in-person. While that is great, everybody is expecting you to have a virtual component now. It's very rare. that you don't. That's what they're looking for. But when we're talking about parallel events, you're talking about creating two different experiences. The reason I say that, I was actually going over this with a colleague the other day, and I like to use the phrase now, sharing, not comparing, because when I was doing in-person and virtual, I did both at the same time at my previous company. People are comparing their experiences all the time, and you don't want that with a parallel event. And it kind of gives you the freedom to also create that. That way you're getting more useful feedback in what worked and what didn't. It's not that in the in-person, they had this great experience, they had this great group work, and I was just sitting there waiting for them to get done. So parallel gives you a lot more freedom to create these experiences and get that feedback from both of those audiences about what really worked, what they loved about it. And then you can build on that, and it creates a whole new strategy over and over again for the events that you're continuing to run it each year.
Fantastic. Leslie, I appreciate you opening this up for us and providing kind of that first overview of the parallel experiences. We're going to come back to sharing, not comparing, because I always thought it was sharing is caring, but I'm going back to Care Bears days.
And not in all instances, yeah.
That's right. That's true. Okay, great. So I'm going to pivot over to Alana, because I think that was a nice intro that Leslie provided, Alana, about these parallel experiences. It's really like two different experiences going on at the same time, if I remember what parallel means. Let's contrast that with hybrid a little bit. How is that different from what a hybrid experience is? Can you help shed a little bit of light on that for us?
Yeah, it's funny because really these two separate terms are relatively new to me as well. And the space that I have been existing in people have only been using the word hybrid. So to me, that means one main event. A lot of it is happening in person, but then there are aspects of it that are also happening online at the same time, which would go along with parallel as well. But I would imagine it more integrated with that main event, which I think is where you could run into that issue of comparing or feeling left out. I also think, just from working with my clients and going to other events and just watching people's bandwidth, that I think you can run into a bit of a trap with hybrid at times, where you're leaving the people in the digital space in the dust a bit, which is certainly something you would want to avoid, because you want everyone to feel as equally cared for as possible at your event, whether it's in person or through the computer.
Sure. So let me make sure that I interpreted you right, because you said you can run into a trouble with bandwidth when you're producing a hybrid experience. You didn't mean technical bandwidth. You mean kind of like a team's ability to
yes,
create these two things, because it's a lot of work, right? Did I get that right?
Yes, you got that 100% right. There are only so many hours in the day, and I work with a lot of teams that are small teams and have a lot to do, and just figuring out how to prioritize everything can be difficult at times.
Sure. Do you think that might be one reason, Alana, why event organizers or experience organizers might favor a hybrid? Because it's sort of one experience, and maybe the audience segment that's digital only gets a piece of it, right? But it's not like you're planning two programs.
Yeah, I could definitely see that being the case. And certainly, at my company, we try and help with solve some of those bandwidth issues. But yeah, I think you're on the right path there in your thinking.
Great. Appreciate that. And I see Leslie nodding in agreement on some of these points. I want to bring Joseph into this conversation. Joseph, I know you've been listening intently to what your fellow panelists have been sharing on some of these definitional questions, right?
Yeah.
It actually, I'm learning there's some real pros and cons to some of these approaches. Now, you left a lucrative and productive law career, from what we learned in rehearsal, to do a crazy thing like produce virtual events, right? So as you're hearing this, what resonates with you as you're hearing about these different modes of delivering experiences?
Yeah, a bunch of interesting points that both Leslie and Ilana bring up. And I want to start with modality, the word you fingered earlier. So we're actually seeing this multimodality challenge that we're bringing up here in events and conferences is really a very broader challenge, and it applies equally to hybrid work. Having people in the office when some of the people are remote. We're trying to bridge a divide of human experience in a way that it works for both of these populations, and it's kind of interesting to see this challenge, replicating in different environments that are kind of analogous to each other. Also, I think that the best way to think about this is as a series of options and understanding the full range of options that are on the table. And as Ilana, as you mentioned, you might make your choices based on the resources that you have from amongst those options, and also, based on the size of your respective crowds. How large is your virtual side? How large is your in-person side? And what kind of dividends can you expect from investing in each? So it's not necessarily that there's a wrong approach, but what's right for you versus what's optimal might not necessarily be the same thing depending on those resources.
Fascinating, Joseph, and I think you've waded into one of these complex areas where I sense that organizations, particularly those that are event-centric and have faced a lot of disruptive challenges over the past year in their core business and revenue models, I sense that what those organizers may want may not be the same thing that their audiences want. Joseph, do you see misalignment at times in people producing events versus who they're targeting those experiences at?
Yeah, I mean, I think that we're still kind of in the early stages of figuring out how to design virtual in a way that keeps the same engagement, or let's just say optimizes engagement for virtual. And very often you're seeing people transfer media that work in person, where, for example, you have a speech, right? Your audience is all in the room. It's kind of uncomfortable for them to pick up and walk out. So your threshold of engagement, what you have to provide there, is far lower than when I have 100 browser windows open, as we discussed pre-show, and I could kind of just jump to the next browser window and move on very, very, very quickly. So how you design for that kind of audience needs to be very intentional and needs to be very, very different. And that actually, in a certain sense, compounds this particular challenge, because no longer can you just stream them in. You actually have to design in a way that's going to work for them and keep them as engaged as they can be.
Joseph, I think that's a huge point. Leslie, I'd like to throw this over to you. Designing with intent, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's such a powerful concept. How do you think about that? Are organizations ready to be designing parallel experiences? Because Ilana shared with us, this is really hard to do even one, right? So,
Yeah.
How does that factor into the decisions organizations are making, not just about the budget that they have available, but can they even pull that off? And how do you think about that from an experience design perspective?
Yeah, so it's tough, but you know what? If you think about it, some people have been doing it for a while, maybe not as much as they think they have, but subconsciously you are designing more sessions with a virtual audience in mind, because the interactivity that you're looking for, the engagement that you're looking for, your speaker is involved in that. So once you tell them that there's a virtual, they're getting more collaboration with you and more involvement in how they're creating this experience, because they want that good feedback too, right? They don't want to hear that their session didn't translate well. That's the biggest problem I had, was getting an activity to translate into a virtual audience as well. So if you think about it, you've already been doing it probably with not as much precedent on it as you are now. But with the design, you have to think about it with more people might choose to go virtual. We have no idea how this has impacted everybody's thinking of traveling, of being in big groups of people. Some people have decided they do not like it. It wasn't for them, and now they know it wasn't for them. So you are now kind of thinking with more of that in the forefront than you were before. So now kind of taking, and you can always take a look also at how you're promoting and how you're surveying these audiences, because if you're surveying them to see what they really want, that's going to help your design. If you would tell me, Steve, that you'd rather go virtual, I'm going to look at you. I'm going to look at what you're coming from, if you've been a past attendee of mine, and what education or sessions or interactivity you were looking for. And I'm going to design based on that. So they can actually pull from a lot of their legacy designer information they had, but now they're more cognizant of designing with that in mind.
That's fantastic. And it's very heartening to know they can leverage all the stuff they do typically and have done, right, in designing two kinds of experiences. It's really interesting to me, though, because I think the world's changing in events, and not just because of COVID and Leslie, all the challenges that you raised that we had may not even have time to get into, right? Just the sort of, you never know when the change is going to stop, right?
Mm-hmm.
And yet it strikes me, Alana, and I want to get your impression on this, that maybe there's a bit of a power shift now in the event and experiences world, that it's not so much about the show producer, the show organizer, right, saying, here's the experience you're going to have. Because that may not cut it anymore now that people have been given a taste of a variety of modalities. We're going to use that again. It's my big word for the night. And so does that suggest, Alana, that attendees, other participants in these programs may have more power? Leslie seemed to be suggesting that organizers are going to have to play to that. They're going to have to deliver value if they want to maintain their communities. Is that a fair assertion?
Yes, I would agree with that. There are so many options out there, especially now that we have virtual events. So you really do need to find a way to engage your audience and set yourself apart and make them want to come. And your attendees' feedback, I think, is a really important part of that. Something I work with my clients a lot on is the engagement with your attendees is not just during the event. It needs to start before the event. It should ideally go on after the event. So it's thinking of an event, not just like the event proper, but this whole almost year-round experience. And if you start engaging with them in these other ways, that's such a great opportunity to learn what they actually care about, what they want to see, so that you can make, the day of the event or the week of the event even better.
I think that's such a fantastic recommendation, Alana, that constant engagement or always on engagement. We've heard some different fun ways to phrase that, right? But less episodic, more regular, right? That whole notion went in a little bit to the naming of this particular program series, right? And it's kind of about developing that regular interaction. And I really like the way you suggested that people can learn then from their communities and audiences as they go through those experiences, understand more about what they're looking for, not just in terms of content, but also the way that content is delivered, how much interactivity might be afforded through the experience.
100%. I mean, we can sit here guessing all day on what our communities want to see, but we're never going to get better and learn if we don't ask questions and really listen to one another. Do that every day at my job. I love feedback. So
that's wonderful.
Yeah.
And that's what we're about here at Cadence. And I know our audience is enjoying this conversation and hearing all the amazing perspectives from the three of you. I'm going to throw one final question to Joseph before we go to our second segment. And audience, I'll prepare you for your role in segment 2 in just a moment. But Joseph, I'm gonna try to be just a little provocative here. We like to do that on occasion at Cadence. We don't offend anybody, but we do like to sort of get into some edgy issues. So I had a client the other day essentially tell me, who cares about the virtual audience? We want to go back in person. I want to be in person. I don't want to have a virtual event if I don't have to. Now that client shall remain nameless, but that was kind of a striking attitude. What do you think of that? Is that gonna be enough in the world that we exist in today?
Yeah, I think it's bad for business, so he should change his mind, just quite frankly. No, you're provocative. You're kind of giving me a little lowball, easy pitch there, right? So, we're in a global world. There are 7 billion, and that rate, just seems to be going up. So 8 or 9 billion soon, and you can fit how many people in a hotel? 1,000, 5,000 in a big convention center. So, like, if you're doing this well, your capacity for virtual, depending on your audience and what kind of organization you are, obviously, but the potential reach is just like orders of magnitude larger than what you could have previously done. Yeah. And so that the virtual side of it could become, if you do it well, much more valuable than the in-person side. But there's kind of value to each. But it seems a bit short-sighted to ignore the fact that you have no spatial limitation and no geographical boundaries.
I like that perspective. I will share that advice with said client at the appropriate time when I'm feeling in the right mood. Wonderful. So folks, this was a great opening segment, and thank you to our community out there in Cadence for listening attentively to our wonderful panel. Folks, we know we're up against time limits, so we can only get into so much detail here, but that's why in segment 2, we build in an opportunity for you, our community, to help us co-create the rest of tonight's program. So the 4 of us are going to come out from the broadcast. We're going to join you out at the tables. We're looking forward to engaging with you, getting to know you. We'd love to learn about, what did you like about segment 1, right? What questions do you still have? What challenges are you facing as you're designing experiences and trying to weigh these choices of, what do I give my in-person audience? What do I give my virtual folks? Are they going to be upset with each other? And probably other questions as well. So we've prepared our special panel here. They have a task to go out and meet with you, and they're going to come back in segment 3 and do a little bit of reporting and share your perspectives with all of us so that, again, we can have that nice co-created experience. So with that, Ilana, Leslie, and Joseph, thank you for a great opening segment. Let's go ahead and jump out to the tables, and we'll see you out there in just a couple seconds.
Thank you.
Okay, Cadence community, welcome back to the broadcast. I'm Steve Boyce. Great to be back for segment 3. It's always hard for me to choose which is my favorite segment, so maybe we'll do a lightning round with our special panel here before we wrap up tonight and see what their favorite segment was. But I suspect you guys had a great time out at the tables. Leslie and I had a great conversation with some of our community members here. So I'm just going to go ahead and throw it out to Alana to get started. Alana, first of all, I don't know how you're focusing on these deep issues about parallel events and hybrid events while you've got the Virgin Islands in the background. But I suspect it just sparks more creativity. What were some of the conversations that you were engaged in at the table? What was the first thing that you'd like to share tonight with?
I think oh gosh, feedback. Sorry. I think the first thing that I noticed and really loved was just the enthusiasm from everyone at my table. It was just a really nice group of people, and it was nice to see people excited about what they do. So that was the first thing. And
Excellent.
then I loved just how everyone really seemed to be focused on opportunity in those digital spaces. So we certainly were talking about the opportunity that virtual events opens for who participates and keeping people engaged, and that the people who do show up are even more so engaged. And we talked about, oh gosh, what else did we talk about? Oh, now I'm running a blank. I'm sure more ideas will come up as we.
No, that's great. Believe me, it's always hard, when you're in a conversation. Steve gave me a homework assignment to remember all of this. Like, how dare he? So, but I want to pick up on the engagement thread, Alana. And we're seeing, Leslie, aren't we, various degrees of engagement from our virtual audiences. Some folks very comfortable with engaging, they're active. Other folks not as much. That's maybe humanity, right? In general, right? You get various groups of people. What are we seeing as trends, though, in engagement, Leslie? And back to some of the design talk we had in segment one, and what were you hearing at the table as it relates to the importance of engagement and making these programs really valuable?
Yeah, so what I was hearing at my table, or our table, is making that virtual audience feel like they're the first one that you were designing for or that you were promoting for. And that's really important, because I hate to use this term, but I'm going to. A lot of the time, virtual audiences feel like they are an afterthought. They are just something that's an additional piece. They get to basically see everything that might or may not be streamed. So with engagement, how we were talking about, some people are looking for it a lot more than others, which is completely fine. But you need to keep in mind that you should probably design with more of the people who want it in mind. So I'm seeing some sessions where they are willing to bring in audience members on camera and on audio so they can ask their questions. Some people would probably completely balk at that and not have any interest in that whatsoever. But then some people are, because it's a lot easier if you think about it. When you're asking a question, if I ask you in a chat, it can be completely misinterpreted and you may not answer anything that I asked with the answer. But if I can voice it to you and I can elaborate, that's going to make the conversation and engagement very much increase, because then other people are going to think that was their point too, or that was a great question, I'm going to add on to it. And it's a lot faster and easier to do it through voice than text sometimes. Some of you may disagree with me. Some of you may be Tony texters and a lot faster at texting than verbalizing a question or a comment. But you really are seeing more people who do want to voice it. Whether or not they're on camera, that's going to be their choice. But if they can voice it and really elaborate to get their point across, that's going to increase your engagement. So that's something to look at with design. That does also come with some tech challenges as well. But it is something to think about with increasing that engagement.
Yeah, there was a gentleman at my table who was talking about how now with all these new modalities, we have different ways of working with different types of learners, with micro learning, user-generated content. And I think that plays well into not only different types of learners, but different types of engagers. So yeah, which I love.
Great points, both of you. And Leslie, it's been interesting to watch, hasn't it, when at the front end of the pandemic, you could barely get people to turn their Zoom cameras on, right? And now people are like, hey, I want to ask my question on camera. That's a pretty, that we've come a long way, right? And maybe not everyone's there yet, but that's pretty amazing.
I'm still seeing, Steve, I did an event and it was for a law firm, and law firms, for some reason, have these kind of very hierarchical, stiff cultures. And there were close to 100 people on there. Yeah, very serious people, too serious, a little bit. And 85 out of 100 were totally off camera, including when we brought on like this unbelievable freestyle rapper to do this interactive, segment, and I was just like blown away.
That's incredible, and I think. And so I think it's, each of you are commenting and we're seeing, I don't know, I don't know if it's a bifurcation of audiences, but I think we're seeing much more diversity in terms of the comfort level of people online, how they're willing to engage, a lot of the different learning styles. It's such a critical point, right? Some people, my mom always tells me, I can't remember anything I hear, but, if you write it down, I'll never forget it, right? So we have fun with mom with that. But nevertheless, but these are really important points. And I think, one of the things that came up at our table was this idea of rising expectations. And Joseph, I want to start with you on this, but love to just panel go after Joseph gets started. Are virtual participants, digital experience participants, do they have rising expectations now, right? So, hey, Leslie, I think you made the point, we're all now going to work on Zoom every day. So a virtual event, a digital experience now better be good, right? Because it's maybe not as special as it was pre-pandemic. Joseph, are you seeing those rising expectations, and does that place harder, challenges on the producers of these things?
Yeah, it's a very interesting point because I think, a lot of what we initially built is kind of novelty experiences, and on the fun side, and there are a lot of those. But when you do a novelty experience once, you can't really do it again next week. You can't do it again. Maybe even next year, it's not as novel anymore.
Right.
And so, everyone's done, for example, as a fun segment of cocktail making, right? Do you want to do another cocktail making? Maybe you've done 10 already. It kind of loses its novelty. And so it's definitely a problem. And I think the answer to it is actually, you can use novelty as appropriate, but you really want to focus on the things that provide value. So those are learning experiences, those are networking experiences, and those are things that people want, and they want to get those. And then you want to kind of think how you layer in fun into that. One of the things we're thinking about, for example, is how to turn from an event to kind of more of, let's say, a masterclass for a team, where it's instead of having a live chess tournament, they have a class that goes for a 10 segment with a grandmaster. So there's kind of a fun leisure objective to it, as opposed to kind of just, a one-off novelty experience. And similar in the event segment, you want to think about how you get people to hit their learning objective or their relationship objective or exposure if they're a sponsor, by weaving the fun into those so that it makes it more enjoyable to do that, but they're here for something that they want to get that has value rather than for the novelty.
I love that. It's almost like virtual's growing up a little bit, right? Is kind of what I'm hearing. Alana, I didn't mean to cut you off before you started. If you had a point to jump in.
Oh, I just think that's what Joseph is saying is right on point. I totally agree. And I guess to piggyback off of that, I run into that issue with clients as well. Again, there's so much out there online and people get fatigued. But one thing that doesn't get old, I would say, are people's authentic stories. And that's why I think user-generated content is so important to your events as well. There's only one you and your experience, right? So really getting those stories is just a really important part to that networking, that event, but definitely tied in with what Joseph is saying as well, as giving people what they want what they're walking away with, what they're learning.
Sure. And by the way, folks, quick shameless plug for Gather Voices, where Alana does her craft. They've got some fantastic technology and capabilities for capturing perspectives and voices. It's really great branding. So folks should check that out. And just Alana, quick follow-up. I can't help myself because we intentionally we do segment 2 here on Cadence like we do because we want our community to be involved. We value their perspectives. We certainly me as host, I don't have all the answers. I don't have any answers, right? I know my panelists always have great answers.
Such humble ignorance, Steve. Such humble ignorance.
I know. Well, I have a very narrow role here, Joseph, and they keep me within my swim lane. But what's great, right, Alana, is we've got our perspectives and voices from our community built into segment 2. And as you talk about, give them an opportunity in the event to participate. Does that make people feel more valued if they have an opportunity to participate?
I would say 100%. I mean, I didn't ask the table I was at tonight, that question, but
No
just
formal
from
survey.
talking, yeah, I was not, but certainly just talking to my clients day in, day out, my own experiences, I think people are definitely going to feel more important and appreciated when you're going to them and you're asking them to participate and you're asking them questions.
I think that's an excellent point. Leslie, we heard a little bit of that at our table, right? I think it was Sinaida said, just don't make me feel like I don't matter, right?
Yes.
I think was how she
Yes.
phrased it. Sorry, Sinaida, for calling you out, but it was a brilliant point. It was so,
It's so true. Yes.
you know, it's one of these points of clarity where it's like, oh my gosh, she nailed it. What do you say about that, Leslie? Are virtual audiences being treated as if they don't matter? Are they the side of fries, the afterthought that you mentioned earlier?
I don't want to say don't matter because of course they do, but I think it all starts with design and promotions. So I gave the example of I've seen where we really heavily promote an in-person event and there's one line of copy at the bottom that says there's a virtual component. No other information about it. And that's what makes it look like it's just there. It's just something you can access. We're not really going to put a whole lot of effort into it, but it's there for you to go to. So I think it very much starts with designing and promoting it in a way that makes them think you were thinking of them first, or they were on equal footing as you're in person. That's going to be tough. I was telling Sinaida that's going to be new territory for a lot of people because we haven't had that line of thinking at all. I don't even say in a long time we haven't had it. It's always been our in-person is kind of our moneymaker, our big main show. That's what we're going to do. But we're going to add this virtual component and whoever can't come can just access it. So it really starts with your design and your promotion. You need to think about that first. And if you think about it, the easier part is seeing what you can put on your virtual because you have to think of speaker rights, who's going to give you permission to stream, who's not, and build it out of there. But it comes with your promotions and your design. Those are the first two building blocks. And kind of starting with that virtual is going to make them feel like you did think of them when building your session agenda and what they have access to and what their experience is going to be.
Yeah, there's also I think that beautifully addresses, Leslie, the kind of preparatory promotion and structuring that's necessary to signal to them that that's kind of you're taking them seriously. I think the parallel or complementary element to that is also ensuring that during an event you create ways that allow people to be noticed as having attended virtually. And there's probably creative ways to do that. So, you might have people actually pass through a greeting room where there's someone who's the face of virtual, welcoming them and then passing them the link on to kind of the main room or whatever, next portion of the program is. You might have a dedicated virtual host who's their guide throughout the course of the program and who's funny, a comedian or something like that. Or otherwise someone whose job is to be the greeter or chat with individuals, welcome them, say, so that their participation is seen and acknowledged in one form or another, or ideally in many touch points. And they're not just kind of somebody who showed up on Zoom and they're hidden somewhere, or somebody who showed up on whatever technology you're using and never got noticed and just popped out.
Yeah, so QR codes obviously have become very popular as of late, and that's something we talked about at the table were these virtual space tactics that people learned, but then held on to even as we're going back into person because they saw how well it worked. And one example that jumps to mind is I had a client who created a welcome video, put it on a QR code, but instead of people scanning that from their computer, they had it on handouts at the hotel rooms. So when people got there, they could watch this welcome video from this person they recognized. And it was an amazing kind of personalized way to just welcome everyone to that event. And that works virtually and in person. So yeah, a lot of cool things you can do. That's
really cool. And I think, that's been one of the challenges, I think, as we move back to, I don't know what the right verb is, hybrid, right? And I know folks were running over. We technically got till 7:30, although we're eating into the post-program networking segment. So I will get disciplined for this by the production team later. But I'm really enjoying this conversation, and they're just feeding me some great comments from the chat. And I want to get this stuff in because this is really good. So, right, with hybrid, Ilana, Joseph, Leslie, I think, and Sinaida notes this in the chat, it seems like there's such an effort to try to make it an integrated experience and sort of give everybody the same thing, kind of, sort of, not, but by nature, the virtual experience has to be different because you're not in person at the hotel having the lunches and the social gatherings and the different networking things in the same way that you would virtually. And so I guess the question that I'm trying to drive towards is hybrid already something that we should retire as a concept? Or is there value in trying to create integration, participation opportunities between your separate audiences? Big question. Should we retire this notion of hybrid and just go parallel? Or is it?
I love. Oh, sorry.
No,
sorry, Steve. I got excited. I love the idea of having audiences who are in person or virtual, finding ways for them to engage with each other. That seems like just a very clear win to me. People want to network, and the more they can network with each other, the better. But I do think it would be a mistake to try to make that virtual experience exactly like the in-person experience, because like you said, they're very different. And there are things you're going to have the stamina for at an in-person event that you're just not going to have the stamina for virtually. Sitting on a chat for 8 hours would be torturous. Whereas in person, it can be a little more fun. You can take some breaks. So I feel like you really have to think about that when you're designing your programming.
Good point. And Joseph, what about your perspective? Because I love Ilana's optimism, and I too would love to see us find a way, right, to have the audiences interact, right? And it's hard. It's really difficult. It's hard enough getting them to participate digitally, and now you want them to cross into a different modality, and it feels like a sci-fi adventure movie. But Joseph, some of the programs that you're running at Get Some Class, are those good substitutes for what's going on site? You know, the hotel lunch, or you grab the coffee with someone you're trying to sell to, or whatever. Has that been effective in some of those modes? You emphasize networking, you emphasize learning in some of these things. Is that filling the void for our virtual audiences?
Yeah, I think in each session kind of depends on its objective. So if you're having a lunch, and you want to kind of make sure that the virtual people don't feel left out, you can have a lunch or some sort of food program there as well. If you're focusing on a networking objective, you kind of want to tweak. You can network over lunch, right? In an in-person setting, but you don't want to kind of pull that into Zoom or whatever technology you're using, because it's not the same. People don't network eating over Zoom well, especially with strangers. And so you kind of, if your goal is relationship, you want to design around an activity that's intended to build relationship. If your goal is just fun, you want to design around super fun, high-charge activities. So you have to think very differently, I think. And so what you might do you might have certain things where you could kind of match nicely. For example, you can have like same dinner or lunch gets sent to the virtual people as in person, and that's cute. But what you're doing in each space, I think you have to be thoughtful to make sure it fits that space well.
Great advice. I'm imagining people eating bowl of soup digitally, and it just could be a disaster. My soup today was.
You've done a wine tasting on Zoom, right?
Yes, I have.
So the first thing that every winery did was migrate its wine tasting onto Zoom, and it just doesn't work well. It's like we're all sipping, but now what? I always
wind up, when you do the twirl, it just jumps out of the glass because I'm looking at myself on camera. I'm not watching the glass. It's really difficult. It's like doing this kind of thing. Leslie, I'm going to come to you with the hybrid. Should we retire the hybrid model challenge? Should we stop trying to integrate and get these people in person and digitally doing stuff together? Maybe we're just not ready for it. Maybe we don't retire it, but what is it? Well, proverbial parking lot, right?
I wouldn't say retire, because I think half of the audience has had a heart attack that something else is going to be retired and they have to shift. So let's use the word shift. No one's ever going to fully retire hybrid. That's never going to happen. You are always going to have people who are just going to do one program. That's it. That's how they're going to do it, which in some cases is understandable. If you don't have the team or the resources to create multiple avenues of content, that's probably not, it's not going to happen for you. But if we kind of give the advice to shift into designing, writing content for virtual, that's going to allow them to have these parallel events. But I wouldn't say retire, because that's probably never going to happen for some people, but shift or kind of opening up that mindset will happen for a lot of people, especially once they start hearing from their audiences as well.
Wonderful. And Leslie, thank you for not saying the word pivot. I think we've all pivoted.
That word's old.
It's been very rough on my knees. Too old to pivot. I gave that up years ago. This has been a really compelling conversation, folks. I can't thank our panel enough for your great perspectives, for taking on a little bit of controversy and responding to some provocative questions. And appreciate our audience and community here at Cadence and sharing your thoughts with us in segment 2 and in chat and with each other out at the tables. We want to keep this conversation going. I think, as Leslie said, we're not ready to retire any strategies yet. We're still going to work on it. All of the engagement folks that are here, they're producing such amazing, compelling, and experiential programs. You guys are going to crack this challenge and figure out, how do we integrate our audiences and how do we know when to do it versus keeping them separate. And I think, like all things, there's a spectrum and probably a place for these different modalities, depending on your program. Alana, you made that point, and I think the others did as well. So folks in our audience here tonight, I want to thank you so much for sharing and investing your valuable time with us here at Cadence. We appreciate your community with us here each month, the end of the month. Of course, I want to thank our very special guests, Alana Chaffetz, Joseph Gerstel, and Leslie Bailey. You guys have been tremendous, really great conversation. And I have to tell you, I always encourage our guests to sort of talk to each other and put the host to the side. And you were one of our first panels that really took me up on that. So kudos for that. I know our audience appreciates less of my voice on air. So with that, folks, we're going to come out of the broadcast. We're going to go back to the tables. We do appreciate you joining us here each month on Cadence. There'll be more information on next month's program, but I hear that we're going to be focusing on something called cross-culture communication in a virtual world. Very exciting. Should be toward the end of March. Watch your email, other communication, social media channels for further details. With that, I'd like to thank
my special emphasis on the resolution of the Ukraine-Russian conflict in the cross-cultural, right?
Well, I don't know if we can tackle those level of issues, Joseph.
Provocative, provocative.
Well, that would be provocative. Indeed, it would. And so, folks, stay tuned for more information on next month's episode. Maybe we'll see what's happening in Central Europe. And as always, we appreciate the unique perspectives of our team and our panelists. I want to thank the folks at Ace Virtual Events for producing our program tonight, and the folks at B-Dance as well for their contributions. And with that, folks, we'll close tonight's program. I'm Steve Boyce. It's been great being here. We'll see you next month. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Steve.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.